Tonight, you let the day loosen its grip, and the city begins to soften at the edges as if someone has turned the volume down on the world. Windows go dark one by one, elevators sigh to a stop, and distant traffic becomes a slow, steady hush, like waves heard from another room, somewhere below the sleepiness of apartments and the quiet of hotel corridors. Another kind of night begins, not loud or restless, but alert in a gentle way. It is the night of systems, of carefully built promises, of things designed to keep going when you finally stop. Street lights hold their pale pools of light, and the air conditioners that cooled the afternoon settle into an even rhythm as predictable as breathing. In kitchens, the last glass is rinsed, taps are closed, and the simple expectation lingers that water will still be there in the morning, cool and clean, without you having to think about it. Phones are set face down, laptops are folded shut, and the little icons that represent your messages and photos slip into the background of your mind. Yet, the world those icons belong to does not blink out because it rests on rooms and cables and power lines and on people who are awake while others drift. If you listen closely, not with effort, but with curiosity, you can almost hear the faint hum beneath the silence, the soft, continuous note of a place that is being held together. It is not a dramatic sound, just a steady one, like a refrigerator in a dark kitchen or wind moving across a distant bridge. Across town, behind unremarkable doors, a few lights remain on. The kind of light that feels purposeful rather than bright. In those spaces, screens glow with calm graphs and quiet numbers, and the night is measured not in stories told aloud, but in balance maintained. Because electricity is not stored in the air like a scent, and it cannot simply be wished into being, it must be guided, second by second, to meet the shifting needs of a sleeping world. And out beyond the edges of the city, towers stand in open ground, carrying that guidance across long distances, their lines faintly singing when the wind turns just right. Some nights, maintenance crews move slowly beneath them, checking bolts and insulators by a headlamp, doing careful work that most people will never notice and never need to. And so, while you settle deeper into stillness, the city keeps a quiet watch over itself, and the simplest luxury of modern life continues unnoticed. Tonight, we drift gently toward that unseen watch, not to be startled by it, but to be reassured by it, as if leaning into the steady shoulder of something dependable. We begin by following something you cannot see, but you can feel it everywhere, in the warmth of a lamp and the soft charge of a phone beside the bed. Electricity moves through the city like a current in a riverbed, guided by metal and insulation, carried along lines that stretch across sand, sea, and neighborhoods of sleeping trees. Far from the buildings that glow at night, power is made in different ways, sometimes from spinning turbines moved by steam, sometimes from flowing water, sometimes from wind, and sometimes from sunlight gathered earlier in the day. By nighttime, solar fields have gone quiet, and the work often shifts toward other sources, as if the grid itself is changing posture for the dark. The remarkable thing is not that power exists, but that it arrives exactly where it is needed in the right amount, without your attention. If too much is pushed into the system, frequency drifts, and the grid becomes uneasy, like a metronome nudged off beat. If too little is supplied, lights dim, machines complain, and the calm of the night begins to fray. So the grid is always listening, always adjusting, balancing supply and demand with a kind of patient mathematics that never raises its voice. In the late hours, demand often falls, and the city becomes lighter, not in mood, but in load, as televisions switch off and office towers stop drawing power for their daytime bustle. Yet some places remain steady: hospitals, data centers, water pumps, and the quiet glow of street lighting, all of them asking for continuity. You can imagine the grid like a wide web with countless nodes, each one tugging gently, each one affecting the others in small ways. In substations, transformers quietly do their work, stepping voltages down, shaping energy into forms that can travel long distances and then slip safely into homes. There is nothing theatrical about a transformer, just the low, reliable presence of a machine built to endure heat, dust, and years. In many parts of the world, the grid holds a steady heartbeat, 50 or 60 cycles each second, and that invisible rhythm helps everything stay in time. It is a soft kind of order, the sort you never think about until it is gone. And then you realize how much peace it was giving you. Sometimes, late at night, crews inspect lines and equipment under headlamps, because darkness is when disruption is easiest to avoid, and repairs can happen without interrupting the day. And all the while, hidden behind the calm surface of your sleeping street, the grid keeps its rhythm, correcting tiny imbalances before you would ever notice. It is a form of care that does not ask to be thanked, a silent choreography that lets you rest. Tonight, as you sink further into quiet, the power moving beneath the world becomes part of the lullaby, steady and sure. In a control room, the night feels different, not because it is brighter, but because it is measured. The air is cool, screens are arranged like windows into an invisible landscape, and the hum of equipment blends with the soft clicking of keyboards. Here, the grid is not a distant concept, but a living system, traced in lines and numbers, watched with calm attention by people who know how quickly small things can matter. They do not command electricity so much as guide it, like a river steward opening and closing gates to keep the flow even. On one screen, a line rises slightly as a neighborhood wakes early, perhaps a building where a bakery begins to warm ovens before dawn. On another, a steady block shows the demand of a hospital unwavering, like a lighthouse that does not go out. Power plants and generators are scheduled and adjusted, some ramping down gently for the night, others holding steady, and a few ready to respond if demand suddenly shifts. There are reserves, too, kept like quiet cushions, extra capacity that can be called upon when a unit trips offline or a storm changes the pattern of consumption. Sometimes a plant is taken out for maintenance, and the system adapts, redistributing load with careful planning done days and weeks in advance. Sometimes a piece of equipment fails without warning, and operators respond with practiced calm, leaning on redundancy and the simple rule that stability comes from preparation. Frequency, that subtle heartbeat of the grid, is watched closely because it tells the truth about balance. When it holds steady, the night remains smooth, and when it drifts, it is a whisper that something needs attention. Modern grids are built with layers of automation, protective relays that react in milliseconds, and sensors that report conditions across wide distances like nerves in a body. Yet, even with all that speed, the work here is unhurried because panic does not help a system that must be precise. A small alarm may chirp, and someone will glance, confirm, record, and move on, the way a nurse checks a monitor without waking the patient. Logs are kept, shifts are handed over, and a thermos of coffee sits nearby, not as fuel for rush, but as company for the long steadiness of midnight. Outside, the city may feel asleep, but in this room, the night is a continuous handoff. Each operator caring for the system for a few hours, then passing it gently to the next. No one expects applause, because the best night is the one where nothing happens at all. And that is the strange beauty of this work. Success that looks like stillness, a calm that you can sleep inside. Tonight, you are carried by that quiet competence as the world keeps its balance with steady hands. Now we drift toward a building that, from the outside, might look ordinary, a low structure with few windows, set back from the street. There is no sign promising wonder, no crowd gathered, only a sense of contained purpose, like a library after hours. Inside, the air changes, cooler and drier, and the sound becomes a constant, gentle roar made of many small fans moving air through countless machines. Rows of servers stretch out like long corridors of calm, lights blinking softly, not to entertain, but to signal life. This is one of the places where the digital world takes physical form, where messages and photos and videos are carried by circuits and stored on spinning disks or silent chips. When someone in another time zone sends a note, it may pass through rooms like this, traveling across fiber, switching through routers, touching servers that never see daylight. When you tap a screen to remember a friend, or to play a song, or to check the weather, a chain of machines answers, quietly, almost instantly, as if the world were always ready. But readiness has weight, and it has cost, and it requires steadiness. Electricity feeds these rooms the way water feeds a garden, continuously without pause, and heat must be carried away just as continuously, or the calm will break. So There are cooling systems that work like patient lungs, moving chilled air, measuring temperatures, adjusting flows, always keeping the room within its narrow comfort. There are cables arranged with care, colored and bundled, the hidden pathways for data, designed so that technicians can trace them in the middle of the night without confusion. There is discipline in the layout, a kind of quiet architecture because disorder is the enemy of uptime. And uptime is the unspoken promise here that the services people rely on will be there when they reach for them, even at 2 in the morning. Many data centers are built in places chosen for stability, reliable power, lower risk of natural disasters, access to fiber routes, and space for backup equipment. Some have batteries that can take over in an instant, bridging the gap until generators start so that the servers never feel the blink of an outage. Security is calm but constant. Doors that open only for the right people. Cameras that watch without judgment. And procedures designed to keep a fragile kind of continuity safe. Even fire is treated gently here with systems that can starve flames of oxygen or release clean agents, because water would be too blunt an instrument for rooms this precise. It is strange, in a soothing way, to realize that so much of modern life rests on these quiet rooms, humming steadily while you sleep. Tonight, the sound of the servers becomes another kind of ocean, a continuous neutral presence, holding your digital world in the dark. The deeper you look into systems that never sleep, the more you notice how gently they assume imperfection. They are not built on the fantasy that nothing will ever go wrong, but on the calm expectation that something, someday, will. So they wrap themselves in layers, redundancy upon redundancy, like blankets set out before the cold arrives. In a data center, power may enter from more than one utility feed, and inside, it passes through switchgear and uninterruptible power supplies that steady it, cleanse it, and keep it flowing. Batteries wait quietly, not dramatic, not noisy, simply ready, releasing energy for a few minutes if the outside world stumbles. Diesel generators stand by like patient guardians, tested regularly, fueled, maintained, and often never used because preparedness is not the same as crisis. In the power grid, lines are routed with alternate paths so that if one corridor is damaged, another can carry the load, and the city barely notices the change. Protective devices stand watch at key points, and when something goes wrong, they isolate the trouble quickly, like a door closing softly to keep a draft from spreading. Even water systems carry this same logic, with multiple pumps, backup controls, and reservoirs that can buffer demand if a station must pause. The most comforting thing about these designs is how quiet they are, because they are meant to operate without disturbing the lives they support. Engineers spend long hours imagining failure modes, thinking through storms, equipment wear, human mistakes, and the simple unpredictability of the world. They do this not to frighten themselves, but to remove fear from the system, turning uncertainty into checklists and procedures and built-in margins. Often, these systems are tested on purpose, brief switchover drills in the middle of the night, so that the first time a generator is needed will not be a surprise. The goal is not heroics, but graceful behavior, a way of failing softly in small containable pieces instead of all at once. At night, those margins feel like a kind of shelter. Somewhere, a technician walks a corridor with a flashlight, listening for a new vibration, looking for a warning light, feeling the warm breath of air from a vent. Somewhere else, an operator notes a slight change in demand and adjusts a setting, and the shift is so smooth that no one in the sleeping city will ever know. This is the secret life of reliability, the work that makes morning possible. And when you think of it like that, the modern world begins to feel less like a fragile miracle and more like a practiced kindness, repeated night after night. Tonight, as your mind slows, you can let these quiet layers hold the edges of the world and let yourself rest within their steady care. As the night deepens, the city's thirst does not disappear. It simply becomes quieter, like a glass set down on a bedside table. Water still moves patiently through pipes you will never see, through joints and valves that have held their shape through seasons of heat and dust. Somewhere beyond the brightest streets, water has already been cleaned and prepared, filtered and disinfected with steady care, so that what arrives in the tap feels effortless. It is strange to think of how many steps sit behind that ease: screens and sensors, basins and filters, operators checking clarity and pressure as calmly as you might check a sleeping child's blanket. In many cities, reservoirs rest like hidden lakes, holding a gentle store of supply, not as a dramatic hoard, but as a buffer against surprise. Water towers and elevated tanks, when they exist, are like quiet sentinels, giving gravity a chance to help, so the flow can stay smooth even when demand flickers. And when gravity cannot do enough, pumps take over, humming softly in sealed rooms, lifting water upward so it can later drift down through neighborhoods at the right pressure. Pressure zones are kept balanced through the night because too much pressure strains pipes and too little leaves upper floors waiting. So the system breathes in a controlled way, pressure rising and easing, guided by valves that open and close with slow intention. If you were to stand near a pumping station at midnight, you might feel the faint vibration through the ground, a reminder that even stillness has a heartbeat. Some nights, crews flush certain lines or test sampling points, not because anyone is watching, but because cleanliness is a habit that must be repeated. A tiny residual of disinfectant is often kept in the network, not to be noticed, just to protect the long journey from plant to tap. Maintenance teams work at these hours too, replacing a section of pipe, inspecting a gasket, listening for leaks with instruments, and patience. The work is careful because water is both gentle and relentless, and a small weakness can become a steady loss if ignored. So the city keeps watch on itself, mapping flows, watching meters, noticing patterns, noticing the quiet changes that say, tomorrow, something might need attention. All of this happens while most bedrooms remain dark, while curtains barely move, while the mind loosens its grip on the day. And when you wake, you will likely never know which pump ran a little longer, which valve eased open, which reservoir offered a little more. That is the kind of kindness infrastructure practices, doing its work without needing to be noticed. Tonight, as you settle deeper, you can imagine water moving beneath the streets like a slow river under stone, steady, clean, and always on its way. Beyond the hidden rivers of water and wires, the night belongs to motion that is preparing to return. In the day, movement feels crowded and urgent, but at night it becomes methodical, as if the world is quietly resetting itself. Highways thin out, and the space between headlights grows larger, giving the road time to exhale. Street sweepers may glide along curbs, and small crews repaint lane markings or mend a patch of asphalt, choosing these hours because the city can spare the space. Traffic signals slip into their night timing, and sensors at intersections keep count, quietly preparing for the morning surge. Under bridges, workers step into shadowed spaces with reflective vests and calm focus, checking joints and bearings, tightening what needs tightening, brushing away what time has left behind. Some structures carry sensors now, quietly reporting tiny vibrations and movements, so engineers can notice fatigue early, long before anyone would feel it. A tunnel may close for a few hours, not as an inconvenience, but as a chance for maintenance to happen without the strain of daytime traffic. You might imagine the city like a ship, and these night hours like the moments when the crew walks the decks, listening for unfamiliar sounds, keeping everything seaworthy. In metro systems, trains return to depots and yards, and the tracks become quiet corridors of steel. There, technicians inspect wheels and doors, clean surfaces that carry thousands of hands each day, and test signals that must never hesitate. Signals are a kind of language, green and red and amber, a steady grammar that keeps speed and distance polite. At airports, even when passenger halls feel calm, the broader machine continues. Cargo moving, refueling, catering, baggage systems cycling in readiness. Runway lights remain precise, and control towers keep their watch, because night flying depends on clarity more than anything else. And far from the terminals, the supply chains of the world keep their own rhythm. Trucks meeting warehouses, containers shifting in yards, schedules aligning like quiet puzzle pieces. Ports, too, are often busiest in the dark, cranes moving slowly against the sky, ships easing into berth with tugboats guiding them like hands on a shoulder. The sea does not stop at night, and commerce does not either. It simply becomes more hushed, more deliberate. There is comfort in that steadiness, in knowing the world can keep moving without turning up the volume. Tonight, while you rest, the systems of movement tidy themselves, repair themselves, and prepare the pathways for morning, so that tomorrow can arrive smoothly, almost without a bump. There are places, of course, where the night never fully settles, where light remains soft but constant, and footsteps continue in quiet corridors. Hospitals are like small cities that stay awake, not for productivity, but for care. Behind every closed bedroom door in the wider world, there is a room somewhere with monitors blinking gently, nurses walking with practiced calm, and staff speaking in low voices so sleep can still exist where it is needed. Here, power is not just convenience, it is breath and warmth and timing. So, hospitals are often connected to multiple electrical feeds, and inside, they carry backups that can take over in an instant. Generators tested, batteries ready, switches that know how to move without hesitation. In some wings, critical equipment is on its own protected circuits, so that a single fault cannot dim the care being given in a fragile moment. Oxygen and medical air flow through pipes, lights stay steady, elevators remain available, and sterile rooms hold their quiet order. Even the simplest reassurance, a hallway lamp, a warm blanket, a clean glass of water, depends on systems that behave reliably when minds are tired. Heating and cooling hold the air at a safe steadiness because comfort here is not luxury. It is part of recovery. And in quiet server closets within the hospital, medical records and imaging systems stay online, so information can arrive the moment a clinician needs it. Behind the scenes, supply chains keep moving, medications restocked, linens washed, instruments sterilized, labs processing samples in a steady rhythm. Outside the hospital, emergency services keep their own gentle watch. Dispatch centers listen to the night like attentive guardians, radios ready, screens showing maps, calls answered with calm voices that aim to lower fear. Ambulances wait in quiet bays, engines prepared, routes known, equipment checked before it is needed. Fire stations rest in a state that is not quite sleep, not quite wakefulness, a readiness that is patient rather than tense. And layered over the city is the invisible web of communication, cell towers, fiber lines, and network equipment that keeps voices connected. When someone calls for help, signals leap from phone to tower, from tower to network, traveling faster than thought, crossing streets and districts in a blink. You do not feel these roots, but you are held by them, because they are part of how a modern city promises safety. Tonight, as you breathe more slowly, you can imagine those promises wrapped around the sleeping streets, not as a tight grip, but as a loose, steady net, present, dependable, and quietly ready if the night asks for it. If we drift even farther out, beyond the streets and hospitals and depots, we find the pathways that connect one sleeping city to another. The internet feels weightless when you use it, but it travels along physical routes. Glass fibers as thin as strands of hair, bundled and protected, running under sidewalks, across deserts, and beneath the sea. Under oceans, long cables lie on the seabed like quiet ribbons, carrying light pulses that hold words, images, and the small signals of modern life. They do not glow in the darkness down there. They simply do their work, steady and indifferent to waves above. In certain places, those cables come ashore and meet the land, tucked into guarded stations where the ocean's quiet work becomes part of the continent's nerves. From there, data moves through dense bundles of fiber into cities, into exchange points where different networks meet and agree to share the flow. On land, routers and switches sit in cabinets and rooms that rarely attract attention, directing traffic the way a good librarian directs readers, quickly, quietly, without fuss. Most of the time, information takes the fastest path, but if a route is interrupted, the network can reroute, sending it along alternate corridors. It is another kind of redundancy, a graceful way of bending around trouble rather than breaking. Some links even travel through the sky, satellites offering additional paths and timing signals, helping networks keep their clocks aligned. Even names and destinations are resolved with their own quiet helpers, systems that translate human words into numerical addresses, so your request can find the right place without you knowing the steps. In network operation centers, people watch dashboards that look like calm weather maps, lines of capacity and latency, alerts that remain mostly silent. When an alarm does appear, it is often handled with a few precise actions: a ticket opened, a line tested, a route shifted, and the world barely notices. That is the pattern again. The best work leaving no trace. And all of this is synchronized across time zones as the planet hands responsibility from one region to another. Night in one place is day in another. And while you sleep, someone else is sipping tea at a desk, watching the same kind of graph, caring for the same kind of continuity. A global relay, quiet, uncelebrated, and constant. Tonight, you are not alone in your rest, because the world is awake in other pockets, and the cables and signals stitch those pockets together. The effect is gentle, like a quilt made of light, laid across continents, keeping connection warm even in the dark. When you step back and look at all of it together, the grids and pipes and cables and control rooms, you begin to notice a curious truth. The greatest systems are designed to feel like nothing at all. They succeed by being boring, by being predictable, by letting your mind forget they exist, so your attention can return to simpler things. A steady lamp on a bedside table, water that arrives without hesitation, a message that sends without delay. These are small comforts that rest on enormous effort. Yet the effort is softened by design, spread across thousands of choices, reinforced by backups, maintained in night shifts and quiet inspections. Standards are written, alarms are tested, spare parts are stored, and drills are practiced, not for drama, but for calm. In many ways, modern infrastructure is a conversation between humility and confidence. Humility, because it assumes the world will surprise us, equipment will wear, weather will change, mistakes will happen. Confidence, because it It prepares anyway, building margins, practicing responses, making failure smaller, making recovery smoother. Engineers often plan for the idea that something will be unavailable at the worst moment, and still the system must hold. Still the lights must stay steady. So, capacity is reserved like a quiet savings account, not meant to be spent daily, but meant to be there when the night gets complicated. And somewhere in that balance is a kind of peace, the peace of a world that is not perfect, but is cared for. As the night continues, demand shifts again, a few ovens warming, a few early lights turning on, a few trains beginning to stir. The systems respond without emotion, simply adjusting as naturally as the body adjusts its breathing when you roll over in sleep. In the hours before dawn, power plants may ramp gently, water pumps may change schedules, and control rooms may note the slow return of the day's rhythm. This is why calm can spread through a city at night, because beneath the surface, so much is being managed quietly for you. So you can let the mind stop searching for loose ends. You can let the day's unfinished thoughts drift out like smoke, because the essentials are being held. And if you ever feel tempted to measure life only by what is loud and visible, you can remember this quieter truth, that continuity is built by patience. Night after night, someone checks, someone maintains, someone notices a tiny change before it becomes a problem, and the world remains steady. And as the first hints of morning begin far away, still hours from your pillow, you can rest inside the soft certainty that the world will keep its gentle rhythm. Tonight, the hum beneath silence becomes something reassuring, and you can follow it softly down into sleep. There is another presence in the night that you almost never notice, because it lives inside walls and ceilings and plain utility boxes. It is the battery, waiting quietly, holding a little store of steadiness, ready to bridge the smallest gap between on and off. In data centers, these batteries sit in long cabinets or tight rooms, not romantic, not loud, simply prepared, because even a second of darkness can feel like a cliff. They are paired with devices that smooth and steady the electricity, filtering tiny imperfections, making sure the current feels clean and consistent for delicate equipment. If the utility feed falters, the batteries respond instantly, so quickly that the servers keep humming as if nothing happened, as if the night never blinked. And during that brief, silent interval, generators begin to wake. Out back, behind fences and sound barriers, engines turn over, fuel lines open, and thick machines begin producing power with a steady, grounded rhythm. They are tested regularly, often at quiet hours, not because anyone expects disaster every day, but because reliability is a habit you practice. A technician may walk past the tanks and gauges with a flashlight, checking levels, listening for an unfamiliar rattle, making sure the backup stays as calm as a sleeping guard dog. Sometimes the power source for that backup is stored energy. Sometimes it is fuel, and sometimes it is both, layered together, so the handoff is gentle. In the grid, similar habits exist. Reserve plants that can ramp up, spinning reserves that are already turning, and other cushions held quietly in the background. There are even plans for the rare moments when a wide area goes dark. Methods for restarting portions of the system in a careful order, like relighting a city one lantern at a time. It is comfort built from small margins, from choices that feel modest in isolation, yet become profound when they are layered across an entire region. You can imagine those layers like a night sky, many faint stars of redundancy, each one too small to matter alone, yet together forming a wide, protective glow. Even the switches that move power from one source to another are built with the night in mind, designed to act fast, to isolate trouble, to keep the rest of the system calm. When a fault occurs, it is often contained in a small pocket, like a single room where a door closes softly, letting the rest of the house remain quiet. And so the night continues, smooth and unbroken, because so many unseen things are ready for the moment you never want to experience. Tonight, you do not need to hold those contingencies in your mind. You can let them exist as reassurance, as preparation you can borrow, while you sink deeper into the gentle dark. Inside every always-on system, there was a quiet struggle that is never dramatic, yet never fully over. It is the struggle against heat, the simple truth that work, whether done by muscles or machines, leaves warmth behind. In a data center, the heat is steady and concentrated, and if it is not carried away, the machines become tired, then unstable, then silent. So cooling becomes a kind of nighttime craft. You may picture long aisles of servers arranged with intention, hot air channeled one way, cool air delivered another, like a gentle choreography of breath. Fans draw air through filters, keeping dust from settling where it does not belong, and sensors watch temperatures the way a gardener watches soil. In some buildings, chilled water runs through pipes to coils, and the air passing over those coils is cooled before it returns to the room. In other designs, the outside air is used when the night is cool enough, and the system takes advantage of the weather's generosity, opening itself like a window without the mess of wind. Where the outside air stays warm, even after midnight, the cooling must be more deliberate. Chillers working steadily, pumps circulating, towers shedding heat into the sky. Sometimes entire districts share these efforts, central plants producing chilled water and sending it through networks beneath the streets. So many buildings can be cooled with a calmer, more efficient rhythm. It is another hidden river, this one carrying cold instead of water and returning warmer after it has done its soothing work. Backup cooling exists too, because in a room full of servers, the loss of cooling can be as serious as the loss of power. So there are spare pumps, alternate routes, and emergency procedures that can reduce load, shift work, or move traffic elsewhere, keeping the system stable while the air is restored. Technicians sometimes walk the mechanical floors at night, listening for a change in tone, a belt that needs tightening, a vibration that suggests wear. They carry small tools and quiet focus, because the best repair is the one that happens before anyone notices a problem. And when they finish, the sound returns to its steady bass line, that soft roar you could almost mistake for distant rain. You might find it comforting to remember that modern life is cooled and carried and protected by these patient circulations. Air, water, electrons, and information all moving in loops, all kept in balance, all watched without fuss. Tonight, as you drift, you can imagine those cool currents flowing behind the walls, easing heat away, keeping the night safe and steady, so your sleep can remain uninterrupted. There are people who learn to love the night not for romance, but for room. They work in the hours when traffic thins, when hallways empty, when the city gives them space to do careful things. You might imagine a small crew arriving at a substation just after midnight, unlocking a gate, stepping into a world of quiet metal frames and faint electrical buzz. Their headlamps make small circles of light. They check connections, scan equipment with handheld instruments, read gauges that tell simple stories of heat and load, and move slowly so nothing is rushed. A different crew, a few neighborhoods away, opens a sidewalk panel and finds the neat bundles of fiber and conduit that carry the city's conversations. They work gently because glass fibers are strong in their own way, yet fragile if bent too sharply, and the goal is to keep the world talking without anyone knowing a repair took place. Sometimes they splice a line, a precise act that feels almost like stitching. Sometimes they reroute traffic, sending data along a different path so the work can happen in calm silence. In the transit yards, someone checks the wheels of a train by lamplight, feeling for wear, listening for a squeak that shouldn't be there. In an airport back corridor, a technician tests a conveyor sensor, then watches luggage belts run empty like practice before the performance of morning. In a water station, someone takes a sample and labels it carefully, then returns it to a lab where instruments measure what the eye can't see. All of these tasks share a single, quiet principle, that maintenance is kindness, repeated. It is easier to think of infrastructure as something built once, a proud project finished, a ribbon cut, a photograph taken. But the truth is softer and more constant, that the real work is ongoing, tightening, replacing, cleaning, inspecting, updating, listening. Night is when many of those acts can happen without interruption. A street is closed briefly, a transformer is swapped, a software patch is applied, a valve is exercised so it won't stick later, a backup system is tested as a rehearsal. And then the crew leaves and the city looks the same, the way a room looks the same after someone has quietly fixed a loose hinge. The beauty is that this work is mostly invisible, because visibility is not the goal. The goal is morning, arriving smoothly. So while you rest, these night workers move through the sleeping city like caretakers, not seeking attention, simply keeping the promises that modern life depends on. Tonight, you can let that thought settle kindly that somewhere, someone is tending the world with steady hands, so you can let go and sleep. In the quiet hours, protection becomes a gentle kind of vigilance, not the sharp vigilance of fear, but the steady vigilance of caretaking. The same way you might check that a door is locked, then return to bed without worry. At a data center, security often begins with simple layers: fences and gates that guide the path, badges that confirm identity, cameras that watch calmly, and logs that remember who entered and when. Inside, there are doors that open only in sequence, small vestibules that prevent rushing, and systems that quietly double-check, because the goal is not suspicion, but certainty. Security guards walk slow rounds, their footsteps soft on polished floors. They glance at panels, listen for an alarm that rarely comes, and keep the atmosphere calm, so the building can continue its steady work. In control rooms, cybersecurity teams may watch for unusual patterns, not as drama, but as weather, an unexpected spike in traffic, a strange request, a signal that something needs attention. The internet is vast, and across it, countless automated probes wander like insects, testing for weakness. So defenses are built like well-made doors, patched, updated, monitored, and reinforced. A quiet discipline rather than a single heroic act. Even fire, which feels sudden and fierce in human stories, is addressed here with careful design. In sensitive rooms, smoke is detected early, often before flame, and suppression systems are chosen to protect equipment without flooding it. Some systems release clean agents, gases that can stop combustion without leaving residue, so the room can return to normal quickly, as if a problem was gently hushed. Temperature sensors and airflow controls add another layer, because heat often gives warning before it becomes harm. And beyond data centers, the grid itself has protections, physical and digital. Substations have locks, monitoring, and sometimes remote sensors that report when a door opens or a fence is disturbed. Utilities coordinate with emergency services, not in a spirit of alarm, but in a spirit of readiness, so response can be swift if needed. What is striking is how ordinary all of it feels. A checklist, a badge, a camera, a backup plan, a quiet handoff between shifts, and the night continues. Protection in modern systems is often less like a fortress and more like a routine, repeated with care until it becomes dependable. It is a comfort to know that the world is not only built, but watched. Not watched to judge you, but watched to keep the light steady, the water clean, the signals flowing, the doors secure. Tonight, you can let those layers do their work without borrowing any of their vigilance. You can rest while the guardians of the night keep their calm rounds and the systems continue quiet and safe. Sometimes, if you step into the night with a curious mind, you can sense that the city has a different economy after dark. Not an economy of shopping and meetings, but an economy of load and flow, of quiet costs and careful choices. Electricity, for example, has a value that changes through the day. When many people cook dinner at once, when office towers glow, when trains run full and air conditioners work hard, the demand rises and the grid tightens its focus. Later, as lights go out and activity slows, the demand eases and the system can breathe. In some places, the price of power follows this rhythm, higher in busy hours, lower at night, encouraging certain tasks to happen when the city is quieter. Factories may schedule heavy processes for off-peak hours. Water utilities may pump more at night, refilling reservoirs when the demand is low, saving strain for the day. Even simple things, like charging fleets of buses or cars, can be shifted toward the dark hours, when the grid has more space. It is a gentle kind of coordination, a way of letting the night carry what it can, so the day can feel lighter. Data centers, too, sometimes adapt, moving flexible computing tasks toward times when power is cleaner or more available. A quiet dance between digital needs and physical limits. In the background, operators and planners use forecasts, weather models, and historical patterns, trying to predict tomorrow's demand as carefully as you might plan a long drive. They do not need perfect certainty. They need enough information to keep the system comfortable, to keep reserves ready, to schedule maintenance, to choose when to ramp up and when to let the night stay soft. All of this adds up to a kind of nighttime intelligence, dispersed and calm, not concentrated in a single mind. It is written into algorithms, schedules, control settings, and human routines. And the result is that the city becomes more efficient, not through speed, but through timing. When you sleep, you become part of that pattern too, because your lights are off, your appliances are quiet, your demand is low, and the grid feels it. Your rest, in a small way, gives the system room. It is comforting to realize that there is a harmony between human rhythms and engineered ones. Night is not only a pause, it is a chance for the world to rebalance, to shift the heavier work into calmer hours, to prepare a smoother morning. And as you sink deeper into sleep, you can imagine the city doing something similar, lowering its shoulders, loosening its grip, and letting the quiet hours carry their share. The world slows, and so do we. And in that shared slowing, continuity feels almost effortless. If you ever drive far from a city at night, you might see red lights blinking slowly on distant towers. They are not alarms, just markers, gentle warnings for aircraft, pulsing like a patient heartbeat in the dark. Many of those towers belong to wind turbines. In daylight, wind feels visible, You see trees move, you feel air across skin, you watch clouds shift. At night, the wind becomes more mysterious, yet it can still be steady, turning blades you can barely see, generating power with a quiet persistence. In some regions, wind is strongest after sunset as land cools and air patterns change, and the night contributes more than you might guess. Solar, by contrast, rests. Panels that drank sunlight all day go still as if closing their eyes, and the grid shifts its posture to match. This is where storage has begun to play a comforting role, like a calm memory of daylight. Batteries charged earlier can release their energy later, smoothing the transition from evening to midnight and helping the grid keep its balance. Other forms of storage exist, too. Water can be pumped uphill when power is abundant, then released later through turbines, turning height into electricity, a slow, thoughtful exchange between gravity and time. Some systems store heat, chilled water, or compressed air, each one a way of moving energy across hours, so the night can borrow from the day without strain. The goal is not perfection, but flexibility. And flexibility makes the night feel safer, because it means the system has options. In control rooms, operators watch weather forecasts with quiet respect because wind and clouds and temperature shape supply and demand in subtle ways. A cooler night may reduce air conditioning load. A windy night may provide extra generation. A still night may ask more of other resources, and the grid responds by leaning gently on what is available. None of this needs to feel complicated. It can feel like a simple truth that the world has rhythms, and the best systems learn how to move with them. In many places, the energy transition is happening not with a single dramatic switch, but with layers. More renewables added, more transmission built, more storage installed, more forecasting refined, more control systems upgraded, more habits adjusted. Change arriving the way dawn arrives, gradually, steadily, without a sudden announcement. Tonight, you can imagine the grid as a listener, attentive to wind in the dark and heat in the air, and the slow drift of demand. It adjusts like a careful musician, staying in tune, keeping the song smooth. And as you rest, the night becomes not a gap in energy, but a different kind of energy moment, quieter, cooler, and gently held by many hands and many designs. There is one more ingredient that helps the night stay orderly, and it is easy to forget because it feels so natural. It is time. Not the feeling of time, which can stretch and soften in the dark, but the shared, agreed-upon time that keeps machines coordinated. In power grids, timing matters because the heartbeat must stay steady. In communication networks, timing matters because signals take turns, packets arrive in sequence, and conversations stay coherent. Even in financial systems, timestamps matter, so transactions can be ordered fairly and records can be trusted. So modern infrastructure carries clocks, many clocks, some inside devices you've never heard of, each one quietly checking itself against a wider reference. Some references come from atomic clocks, instruments so precise they lose almost no time, holding the definition of a second with calm authority. Some references arrive from satellites, which send timing signals down to Earth, helping distant systems agree on what now means. Within buildings, servers and routers regularly compare their clocks to trusted sources, nudging themselves back into alignment. It is like a choir tuning before a song, each voice adjusting slightly until the whole becomes harmonious. You can imagine millions of tiny adjustments happening silently through the night, devices keeping themselves synchronized so that the world feels seamless in the morning. When you send a message, the path is timed. When a sensor reports a voltage, it is timed. When a train signal changes, it is timed. When a payment is recorded, it is timed. And because timing is quiet, it rarely draws attention, which is exactly the point. Timing is one of those hidden foundations that makes everything else feel smooth. In some control rooms, operators can see this synchrony as data, as aligned measurements, as events that line up properly, telling a clear story about what happened and when. Without it, the story would blur. Cause and effect would be harder to trace, so time becomes another form of care, an invisible structure that lets complex systems behave politely, taking turns, staying in rhythm. Late at night, when your own sense of time starts to soften, it can be soothing to know that the world still keeps its gentle order, that there are clocks within cables and substations and server racks, steady as breathing, keeping the shared beat. And perhaps that is part of why night feels safe. Not because everything is controlled, but because so much is coordinated. Tonight, you can let your own internal clock slow down while the world's quiet clocks continue their attentive work, keeping the systems aligned, keeping the unseen song in time, so you can drift freely into rest. If you could view the city from above at this hour, you might notice that the brightest places are not always the loudest ones. A hospital wing, a small control center, a water plant, a data center set back from the road, each one glowing with quiet purpose. And yet the true work is not the glow. It is the steadiness. The most successful systems are designed to disappear into normal life. They are meant to be trusted, then forgotten. A bridge should feel like a road. A power outlet should feel like a given. A tap should feel like a simple extension of the world's generosity. This disappearance is not neglect. It is achievement. It means a system has become so reliable that it can leave your mind in peace. It means the city can spend its attention on living, not on managing emergencies. Of course, emergencies still exist. Storms arrive, equipment wears, accidents happen, and the world remains imperfect. But what changes with good infrastructure is the scale of disruption. The best systems fail softly. They isolate trouble quickly. They recover in small steps. They learn. After an outage, a report is written, a setting is adjusted, a part is replaced, a procedure is improved, and the future becomes a little steadier. This is how trust is built, not with slogans, but with repetition, night after night, morning after morning. And there is something deeply human about that repetition. Behind every automatic response, there is a person who planned it. Behind every maintenance schedule, there is someone who noticed a pattern. Behind every backup generator test, there is a technician who took the work seriously. Even when machines do the immediate reacting, humans designed the rules, shaped the margins, and decided what mattered. Reliability is, in a quiet way, an expression of care. It says, we will keep the essentials steady. We will make the dark hours safe. We will keep water clean. We will keep signals flowing. We will keep the lights warm. And in return, you can sleep. Tonight, you do not need to solve anything. You do not need to predict tomorrow. You can rest inside the idea that vast systems built from patient decisions are holding a gentle line against chaos. You may never meet the people who keep that line, and they may never be thanked. But their work shows up in every ordinary morning, in every routine that begins without friction. As the night continues, the city's hum remains quiet and consistent, like a distant engine that never quite stops. And little by little, far from your window, the world begins to tilt toward dawn. Not with urgency, but with the same steady competence that carried you through the dark. Somewhere, the first hint of morning arrives before you feel it. It may be a bakery warming ovens, a streetlight sensor preparing to switch off, a control room noting the slow rise of demand as the city begins to stir. The grid responds gently. A generator ramps up a little. A reserve unit is brought closer to ready. A battery that carried part of the evening's load rests again, waiting for the next call. In water systems, pumps may change schedule, shifting from refill to steady delivery, keeping pressure comfortable as taps begin to open. In transit yards, trains are woken one by one, doors tested, signals confirmed, the day's first routes rehearsed in quiet efficiency. In airports, concourses brighten, screens refresh, belts begin moving with purpose, and the night's background work steps out of the shadows. In data centers, nothing truly changes, and yet everything changes. The flow of requests increases. Morning news loads, messages surge, work calendars awaken. A different kind of traffic replaces the gentle pace of midnight. Servers keep humming in the same cool air, accepting the new rhythm without complaint. Shift changes happen too. In operations centers, one team hands over to another with calm notes and careful logs, a quiet ritual that carries continuity across human hours. The night team leaves not as heroes departing, but as caretakers stepping back, trusting the next hands. Across the world, the handoff continues. While dawn reaches one city, another is deep in afternoon. Somewhere else, evening is beginning, and their systems are preparing for the same slow transition into the dark. It is comforting to remember that the planet is always in motion, yet the care remains consistent. A relay of attention passing across time zones, a global agreement that someone will always be awake somewhere, watching the lines and pumps and circuits. By the time your own morning arrives, the world will feel ordinary again. You will reach for a light switch, and it will respond. You will pour water, and it will be there. You will check a message, and it will appear. These are small miracles that no longer feel like miracles because they are practiced. And practice is what makes them gentle. Tonight, you have wandered through the unseen corridors of continuity, not to make life heavier, but to make it lighter. Because knowing the night is held can help your mind release its grip. And as the first soft light waits beyond the horizon, you can let your thoughts grow quiet like a city at midnight and drift peacefully toward sleep. Now the story begins to slow, as if we are stepping away from the humming rooms and returning gently to the quiet of your own space. The city is still there, the pipes and wires and cables still doing their work, but you do not need to follow them anymore. You can let them become background again, the way they were meant to be. In a sense, the systems that never sleep are not asking for attention. They are offering relief. They exist so you can set down the burden of managing the world and simply live inside it. They exist so the night can feel safe and ordinary, so that the mind can soften its vigilance, so that rest can arrive without negotiation. And perhaps if you carry one thought from this gentle walk, it is gratitude. Not a loud gratitude, not something you must perform, just a quiet appreciation for the unseen steadiness that surrounds you. For the people who designed backups and wrote procedures. For the crews who tighten bolts and test generators. For the operators who watch the grid's heartbeat and keep it in rhythm. For the technicians who keep water clean, the signals clear, the cooling steady, the doors secure. It is not triumph or failure, but endurance, a kind of patient competence repeated so often that it becomes invisible, and invisibility becomes the highest compliment. You might notice how the best parts of modern life rarely demand your focus. A smooth elevator ride, a warm shower, a clear call, a bright street at midnight, these comforts are gentle precisely because someone else carried the complexity for you. And when a system is working well, it does not announce itself. It simply allows you to forget it, and forgetting becomes a form of peace. As you rest, the city will keep its soft hum. It will carry electrons through dark streets. It will move clean water beneath sidewalks. It will route messages through cables under oceans. It will cool rooms full of machines and light corridors where care continues. All of it happening without urgency, without spectacle, like a steady hand resting on the world's shoulder. You are part of that world, too. A quiet node in a wide network of care, held in place not by tension, but by trust. So you can let your breathing deepen. You can let your jaw unclench. You can let your thoughts drift away like clouds thinning in the night sky. Outside, the world continues its quiet work, but inside, you are allowed to stop. You are allowed to be held by what you cannot see. Tonight, you do not need to chase tomorrow. The systems will keep their watch, and you can simply float weightless into stillness. Good night.